Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 21 Part 1 Rank Evaluation. The last time Jinwoo had stood at this particular crossroad, he'd chosen the blessed mystery box over the cursed one, which had given him the demon's castle key. That, in turn, had given him access to the demon's castle dungeon, where he'd gained plenty of things. He'd leveled up significantly, collected a ton of loot, and the gold. He'd saved up so much gold that he almost felt obligated to spend some. If I had to do it all over again, I'd make the same choice without a second thought. However, he was still curious about the road not taken. The blessed mystery box was supposed to give him something he wanted, and the cursed mystery box was supposed to give him something he needed. So what was inside the other box? The blessed mystery box definitely gave me what I wanted, after all. And now, Jinwoo had the perfect opportunity to satisfy his curiosity. He nervously awaited the system's answer. For some reason, he felt as though it was being unusually slow. Ping. His worries were unnecessary, as the system soon responded. You have selected item, Cursed Mystery Box. The chosen item will be supplied. A small box appeared at Jinwoo's feet. Nice. He nervously picked it up. The weight of the box in his hands felt very familiar. Could it be? Jinwoo hastily tore into it, and his eyes widened as he saw the contents. This is... Jinwoo went straight home after exiting the demon's castle. The first thing he wanted to do was clean himself up, as he hadn't bathed once while inside the dungeon. He could have bought water from the shop, but there hadn't exactly been an optimal time or place to do so. Can't really wash up leisurely when you're surrounded by monsters. Shaw. It wasn't until he was back in his apartment and relaxing his muscles under a hot shower that he actually felt like he was out of the dungeon. Home sweet home. Jinwoo got dressed in fresh clothes, draped a towel over his wet hair, and sat on the edge of his bed. It was time to sort things out. He first called up the stat window. Stats. Ping. Dizzyingly long strings of letters materialized before his eyes. They landed on something in particular. Available ability points, 20. The points he received for completing the Demon Soul's quest. Naturally, he invested all the points in intelligence. Ping. Stats. Strength, 178. Stamina, 137. Agility, 147. Intelligence, 149. Perception, 119. At long last, intelligence was barely higher than most of the other stats. Despite still being quite a bit behind the strength stat, it was a huge improvement, considering how he'd been ignoring it until recently. Strength, stamina, agility, intelligence, and perception. They were balancing out nicely. Everything here is important. Jinwoo had been obsessed with every stat at different points, so he'd learned the unique qualities and advantages of each. Wait, considering the state of things, what if he increased all his stats evenly instead of focusing on one? He'd be an all-round player. Jinwoo's ambitious streak flared up. It was an idea he could happily ponder only because every single stat was at a satisfactory level. Once my intelligence surpasses strength, I should also increase the others bit by bit. With his mind made up, Jinwoo turned his attention toward the skill window. And there was the third reward. Reward 3. Mystery reward. If he was being honest, he had been much more preoccupied with the first and second rewards, any item of his choosing and 20 bonus points, and, besides slight curiosity, hadn't been very interested in the third. But his jaw dropped once he saw what it was. Reward 3 has been delivered. A scroll similar in size to the Demon's Castle entry permit simultaneously appeared in his hand. What's this? Caught off guard by the delivery method, Jinwoo opened the item in surprise. Recipe: Elixir of Life. Learn how to craft the Elixir of Life. Jinwoo stared down at the scroll. I can make it myself? Mage-type hunters were the only ones with the ability to craft weapons with mana, but Jinwoo supposed that he was also one of them. But to think I can craft something as long as I have the recipe. Jinwoo's heart started pounding as his mind raced. What would he be able to create? What's the Elixir of Life? Jinwoo read through the information for the Elixir of Life. Item: Elixir of Life. Acquisition difficulty: S. Category: Consumable. A mystical potion that cures all diseases using powerful magic. An entire bottle must be consumed for the full effect of the potion. It can cure all diseases? His bedridden mother immediately came to mind. Thanks to Jinho, he had already confirmed multiple times that an item's effect worked on other people, which meant he could save his mother if he crafted this elixir. His hands trembled as he clutched the scroll excitedly. The ingredients were straightforward as well. World Tree Fragments. He received those after defeating Vulcan on the 50th floor of the Demon's Castle. Spring Water from Echo Forest. He'd acquired that by defeating Metis, the Necromancer, on the 75th floor. And lastly, Purified Blood of the Demon Monarch. This was an item he hadn't come across yet. However, based on the first two ingredients, it was easy to guess where he could find the blood of the Demon Monarch. He'd have to go higher. It's probably the ultimate boss on the highest floor of the Demon's Castle. That meant he'd be able to gather the ingredients for the elixir by clearing the entire dungeon. That's when it occurred to Jinwoo. Oh! A moan inadvertently slipped out of him at the revelation. The item in the cursed mystery box, the Elixir of Life, was supposedly the one thing he wanted most in the world. Mother! Tears welled up in Jinwoo's eyes at the thought of being able to see his mother healthy again. Just then, a message arrived. Ping. You may learn the crafting skill using the recipe, Elixir of Life. Would you like to acquire the crafting skill? The electronic sound snapped him back to reality. He would have to complete the raid of the Demon's Castle in order to make the Elixir of Life, so the faster he prepared, the sooner he could return home. There was no time to be sentimental. Learn! You can now craft item, Elixir of Life. This isn't a dream, right? As if to answer his question. The numbers at the end probably indicated that he owned 2 out of the 3 necessary ingredients, the World Tree Fragments and Spring Water from Echo Forest. Jinwoo opened up his inventory and took out the item next to the spring water. It was a necklace assembled by tying small animal skulls together. Item: Demon Monarch's Necklace. Acquisition difficulty: S. Category: Accessories. Agility plus 20, Intelligence plus 20. There is a set buff that will be revealed when worn with Demon Monarch's earrings and Demon Monarch's ring. Set buff 1. Hidden. Set buff 2. Hidden. Spring Water wasn't the only item he'd gotten from Metis, Guide of Souls. He'd also been gifted this abhorrent necklace that screamed a poor taste. Why are all the neck accessories like this? Jinwoo grimaced as he remembered the design of the dog collar he was currently equipped with, and he held up this new item to his neck. Ping. Would you like to change Warden's collar to Demon Monarch's necklace? The advantages granted by the Warden's collar and Demon Monarch's necklace were similar. They both raised 2 stats by 20 points. However, the Demon Monarch's necklace had an additional set buff. Change. You have put on item, Demon Monarch's necklace. The dog collar reappeared in Jinwoo's hand as the necklace made of skulls took its place. Jinwoo shoved it back into his inventory and checked the buffs for the set of Demon Monarch's accessories. Item: Demon Monarch's Necklace. Set buff 1. All stats plus 5. Set buff 2. Hidden. Every stat increased by 5. All his stats had gone up by 5, and that was with just one of the set buffs revealed. There would be one more once he completed the entire set. The Demon Monarch's Ring. Taking into consideration that a set buff was usually more impressive when the actual set was complete, this was fantastic news. And yet, the S-rank accessories were only a small boon from the Demon's Castle. The real reward was his extreme jump in level. Jinwoo smiled proudly when he saw that he now sat at level 77. I leveled up 16 times in 1 week. He'd improved at a rate he could never have dreamed of in C-rank dungeons. It was his compensation for toiling in hell for 7 days. The Demon's Castle dungeon was unfinished, but there was no denying that this had been a successful raid. There was just one thing Jinwoo couldn't wrap his mind around. He placed the item from the cursed mystery box directly under fluorescent light. What the heck is this thing? The pitch-black key appeared to be absorbing the light around it. An information screen didn't pop up, either. This is a first. Instance dungeon keys were ordinary enough items that they even appeared via regular mystery boxes from time to time. But he had never come across this kind before. Where am I supposed to use this? Maybe it was because it came from a cursed mystery box, but he also couldn't help feeling something ominous emanating from the key. It wasn't like he could get rid of it, either, given how much effort he'd put into obtaining it. I guess I'll need it someday. After all, the cursed mystery box was supposed to supply an item he needed. Jinwoo rose to his feet after placing the key in inventory. He would need to acquire some artifacts if he wanted to complete the Demon's Castle raid. Got some stuff to sell too. Unfortunately, the reality was that E-rank hunters had difficulty buying and selling high-level artifacts. Who wouldn't be suspicious of a low-rank hunter, especially one thought to be at rock bottom, trying to sell a valuable item that even a high-rank hunter would have difficulty acquiring? He'd have the same problem with buying anything. As long as he was dragging along the label of E-rank, he wouldn't be able to reveal where his money was coming from. And what would I say if someone asks where I'm planning to use the gear? Talk about opening a can of worms. Then I guess it's time. It was time to stop pretending to be an E rank and receive a rank reevaluation. He was to be properly ranked based on his actual abilities. A serious expression crossed his face. Since I've dragged myself up to this level, I won't be pushed around anymore, right? That had been his intention from the start. Despite the inconvenience, he'd stayed as an E rank to avoid being pulled in different directions by those higher than himself. But now, Jinwoo hadn't been intimidated by Yunho Baek, the guild master of White Tiger. No, he was confident he'd be able to hold his head high in front of anyone, not just Baek. There was no reason to hide his true abilities anymore. Ba-dump, be-a-dump, be-a-dump. The pounding of his heart seemed to increase in volume at the thought of shedding the E-rank label he'd been stuck with for so long. He just had one thing to confirm before that. Jinwoo turned on his Hunter-exclusive phone. It had been a week since he'd last powered it up, so his missed calls and inbox were pretty full, but they were mostly from unknown numbers. Alas, he didn't have enough time to check each one. I guess they'll call back if it's urgent. Jinwoo mentally shrugged as he scrolled through his call history and found the number he was looking for. Tra-la-la. The person on the other end swiftly answered before the second bar of the pleasant ringtone. Boss! Had he been in the dungeon too long? To think he was actually glad to hear that familiar voice. Jinwoo cracked a smile. Did the talk with your father go okay? Yes. It went better than okay, boss. Really? That was good to hear. Jin-woo couldn't get reevaluated before Jin-ho completed his deal with his father, but now that everything had been taken care of, there was nothing standing in his way. The result was obvious from the tone of Jin-ho's voice, but it was nice to hear him verbally confirm it. Boss, I actually wanted to talk to you, Abu. Beep. Huh? His phone had died and cut off the call. Thinking back, the battery was low even before I entered the demon's castle, so Jin-woo was relieved he'd at least managed to check on the matter he called about. He started getting dressed. The Hunters Association headquarters wasn't far, so the reevaluation wasn't likely to take him long to complete. Oh, right. Jin-woo stopped at the front door and hurried back into the apartment. He just recalled his sister. He left a short note for her on the dining table, in case disappearing again without saying a word after being away for a week would worry her. Your brother was here. Satisfied, Jin-woo headed out the door. It had been a while since Jin-woo set foot inside the reception area of the rank evaluation office for awakened beings. Has it been 4 years already? Or was it 5? Jin-woo was full of emotion as he stood in front of the receptionist, who addressed him without looking up. ID and contact information, please. Jin-woo vaguely remembered the procedure and had prepared all the necessary materials beforehand, so he swiftly handed over his ID and his phone number. Huh? The receptionist raised an eyebrow at Jin-woo's ID. Sir, this is a hunter's license. Yes. The receptionist clearly failed to understand him. Sir, if you aren't satisfied with the evaluation result, that's not our department. That's not it. I'd like to get reevaluated. Pardon? The receptionist, who'd been glancing back and forth between Jin-woo's face and the picture on the license, raised a finger. Hold on, please. The employee headed toward a high-strung middle-aged man seated behind him. Assistant manager, a hunter is here because he wants to get reevaluated. Reevaluated? What's his current rank? E rank, sir? The assistant manager craned his neck to check out Jin-woo. This happens sometimes. There are hunters who can't accept reality and come back here hoping against hope after being stuck in a fantasy. Then him too? The higher-up nodded. Reawakened, my ass. He sees other hunters make tons of money and become famous, so he's in denial and thinks he's got a shot. These guys are a pain to deal with, so just let him know that there's a fee for reevaluation and send him to get an assessment. Yes, sir. The receptionist went back to his post, his worries now assuaged. The assistant manager watched his employee and Jin-woo from afar, tooting before turning back to his computer monitor. But his finger froze over the mouse. The name on the hunter's license. It sounded familiar. Where have I heard that name before? Once Jin-woo was on his merry way to the evaluation room, he so quietly approached the receptionist. The E-rank hunter just now. What was his name? Mr. Jin-woo Sung. Do you know him? No, that's not it. He definitely knew the name, but he couldn't remember from where, until it hit him. Oh, the favor. Someone had asked to be contacted if a hunter Jin-woo Sung turned up. How could he have forgotten? The assistant manager found a secluded area and hurriedly took out his phone. Ring. This is Yunho Beck. President Beck, sir. I'm just calling about that hunter you mentioned before. You know Hunter Jin-woo Sung? He's actually here. But how did you know he'd come? Jin-woo Sung is there. Yes, he just came in for a reevaluation. The conversation suddenly cut off with silence on the other end, but it didn't last long. This time, President Beck sounded urgent. Could you please delay the reevaluation even just a little bit? I'm on my way. The assistant manager cocked his head. Was he hearing things? The guild master of the unparalleled White Tiger Guild sounded anxious. Who would have thunk it? In any case, the reevaluation process was out of his hands. He scratched the side of his head as he replied, "He's already at the evaluation building, sir." The bewildered assistant manager, Kisa Young, ended the phone call with President Beck. Wait, what the hell's going on? It was strange enough for an E-rank hunter to want to get reevaluated, but for the guild master of White Tiger to request he be notified of the results immediately on top of that? Is there really something here? There had to be for President Beck of all people to be so invested in the situation. Kisa shook his head. Nah, it can't be. Second awakenings were very rare. It was a few months ago by this point, but the whole association had been over the moon about a potential reawakened hunter who turned out to be a false alarm. That was the norm with reawakenings. True reawakenings were like finding a needle in a haystack, while misunderstandings were a dime a dozen. Many a hunter has come to be reevaluated and left with nothing but a lighter pocket. The White Tiger Guild must have made a huge mistake. Still, Kisa couldn't refuse a favor for President Beck, considering his own relationship with the guild. I'll be right back. Huh? Where are you going, sir? I just remembered that I have to do something in Building B. Building B was where the mana evaluation room was located and was referred to as such by the employees of the association. Yes, sir. Call me right away if anything happens. Will do. Kisa brushed off the thought of a possible reawakening, but as he realized that President Beck was probably already on his way, he hurried over to Building B. Jinwoo took a seat on the end of a bench in the waiting room. Currently, there were 3 others who'd arrived before him. Their apprehension was clear on their faces. Jinwoo completely understood how they felt. I mean, the result will dictate their entire lives going forward. He'd had the same thoughts when he first visited the association. If I'm an A rank, or no, even a B rank would be fine. Or hell, maybe I'm an S rank. He'd had those pipe dreams. So it had come as a shock when his evaluation revealed he was an E rank. Jinwoo giggled to himself as he reminisced about 4 years ago. What is he laughing at? Forget that. How can he laugh now? Jinwoo remained unconcerned despite the strange looks the others were sending him. Was he born with nerves of steel? Guess he just doesn't get nervous. As Jinwoo betrayed no further emotion, the others blinked and awkwardly looked away. Nothing's really changed since then. He'd had a similar experience last time as well. Back then, he'd been on edge around the other hunters in the room, but also curious about what ranks they'd gotten. Grinning, he looked around the building's interior. For the most part, it was like the people inside it. Since the Hunters Association itself had been formed less than 10 years ago, the building was still clean, like new. It was almost exactly how he remembered it. There was only one difference. Them. As Jinwoo scrutinized the sharply dressed men and women gathered across from him, the man sitting next to him spoke up. I heard they're all guild people. Guild people? Yeah. Not many hunters join the small guilds, so they hang out here and try to sweet-talk awakened beings as soon as they get their results. No wonder the air among them was frigid. The way they watch us is like hungry wolves, too. There was a reason for that. In case you weren't aware, it's best to avoid joining those guilds. Why is that? Apparently, small guilds take on tons of dangerous raids, and their death rates for hunters are high. Jinwoo nodded his understanding. Obviously, small guilds were in a strange limbo. Unlike private strike squads, Small guilds wouldn't be satisfied with tackling low-rank dungeons, but their hunters weren't good enough for high-rank missions. Because of this, unfortunate accidents were commonplace. That's why recruitment is important to them. They'd reached a point where they had to camp out in the association building to stalk and target newbies. Oh! The other man, who'd been dabbing the sweat off his bald head with a handkerchief, cautiously offered his hand to Jin Woo. Shouldn't we introduce ourselves, since we were fated to meet like this? I'm Yoon Hoon Yoon. I'm Jin Woo Sung. Following that brief introduction, they went back to quietly waiting their turns. Next, because of the open concept of the waiting area, one could easily read the facial expressions of whoever had completed the test as well as those of the staff members. The awakened being who had just finished didn't look happy. I guess he's AD or E rank. The guild people seemed to have shared Jinwoo's assessment, as they didn't show any interest in the fellow as he passed by. It was quite an honest reaction. It made one wonder if there wasn't another way to get the assessment. Next, please! Another result, another disappointed hunter. This one headed to the exit with heavy footsteps, but it was to be expected. High-rank hunters wouldn't get paid the big bucks if they were that commonplace. For the average individual, even being a C-rank hunter would be like winning the lottery. They could make a lot of money by joining a private strike squad and, if they were lucky, could get into a large guild. Even the White Tiger Guild had 4 C ranks among their latest recruits. Entering a large guild would guarantee a salary comparable to that of doctors or lawyers. Yoo-hoon addressed him once more. If you join a large guild, you get a big signing bonus, right? The hand holding his handkerchief trembled slightly. I have some debt, you see. Can't live with my daughter because of it, too. That's why I'm quite nervous. Yoo-hoon mumbled, then looked up hastily in shock and bowed his head apologetically at Jin Woo. Oh boy, I can't believe I said that to someone I just met. I'm being a nuisance, aren't I? I tend to say too much when I'm nervous. It's fine. Jin Woo smiled and bowed back. Yoo-hoon clearly wasn't kidding about being anxious, as he took several deep breaths. Yet another awakened being exited the evaluation room. Next, please! It was Jung-hoon's turn. However, having broken into a cold sweat, Young-hoon gently tugged on Jinwoo's sleeve. Perhaps he was ill? Are you feeling all right? Jinwoo asked, concerned. Young-hoon shook his head. No, I'm fine, but would you like to go ahead of me? I'm feeling a little too worked up, so... He looked desperate. Was there any reason to reject the offer to go first? Jinwoo happily accepted. Who wouldn't be jittery if a few minutes could transform the rest of their life? Jinwoo walked up to the no-nonsense staff member in Jung-hoon's place. Name? Jinwoo Sung. Mr. Sung. Okay, please place your hand on that black panel and wait. Jinwoo headed to the manometer and did as instructed. He's already been evaluated as an E rank. The employee looked over Jinwoo's paperwork. Most hunters who wanted to be reevaluated tended to be of E rank. After sending a pitiful look Jinwoo's way, they belatedly started up the manometer. Blip. Whum, whum, whum. The manometer made a few noises for a brief moment, then suddenly stopped. The result appeared on the monitor. Huh? What's wrong with this thing? The tester looked perplexed and stopped Jinwoo as he drew back his hand. Hold on, please. Pardon? Let's try that one more time. Okay. Jinwoo put his hand on the panel again. Blip. Whum, whum, whum. What? This had never happened before. The employee looked more and more frustrated. Why did the machine have to act up now of all times? They requested Jinwoo try it again. I'm very sorry, sir. Let's try it one last time. Jin-woo decided to just keep his hand on the panel, due to all the retakes. Blip. Whum. Seriously? What the hell is going on? Beads of sweat appeared on the man's forehead. Murmur. By this point, others were beginning to notice that something odd was happening. Huh? What's going on? How many times has this been? Is there some kind of problem? The employee's brow grew sweatier, the more attention he drew. Blip. Whum. For fuck's sake, what am I supposed to do? As panic began to set in. What's going on? Where's Changsik? And why are you doing everything alone? The employee spun around. Ki Se-young, the assistant manager from reception, was here. Mr. Young. The tester was relieved at the unexpected backup. Changsik went to the restroom. How dare he leave his post in the middle of... Ki-se cut himself off. Well, I did the same thing. Cough. Anyway, it appeared Ki-se had arrived just in time. Was the newbie having trouble in the absence of his superior? It was time for a veteran to show how it was done. So? What seems to be the problem? Ki-se showed interest in the situation. The manometer might be malfunctioning. It is? Take a look, sir. It keeps showing an error message. The employee stepped aside so Ki-se could check the monitor that displayed the results. Ki-se froze. How long have you worked here? About 6 months. Did I press something I shouldn't have? That's not it. Just get Changsik over here immediately. What? I don't care if he's in the restroom. Get him here now. Ki-se's voice rose. The employee flinched. What's wrong, sir? This isn't an error. It's saying that it's off the charts. Don't you know what that means? So it's not an error message? Why were all the newbies so slow? Ki-se's gaze turned from the rookie to the one being evaluated. To think this would happen. Ji-woo-sung, the man the guild master of the White Tiger Guild had asked Ki-se to report on. Ki-se didn't take his eyes off Jin-woo as he explained. It means we can't measure his mana levels with our manometer. Stupid. Wait, then that means... Did the newbies say they'd been here for only half a year? The last time this had happened was 2 years ago, so no wonder the kid hadn't realized what was going on. Ki-se continued in a shaky voice. Yeah, he's an S rank. S for special. People often mistook it as a rank because the term was so widely used, but it actually stood for those whose mana levels were impossible to measure. Just hurry up and get Changsik. Right away, sir. Changsik Kim was still pulling up his pants when he came running over after the employee's call. Huff. Let me see. Changsik's face paled after checking the monitor. His gaze shook as it landed on Jin-woo. This is Korea's 10th. He approached Jin-woo. Seeing him, Jin-woo finally took his hand off the black panel. According to the manometer, Mr. Sung, Changsik abruptly remembered that Jin-woo was already a licensed hunter. I mean, Hunter Jin-woo Sung. It's impossible to measure your mana levels with the current equipment. I'd have to receive permission from upper management to use a more sophisticated meter. So could we ask you to come back in 3 days? Changsik informed Jin-woo of the next step in the process. How long had it been since he'd last said these words? He could barely remember the previous time. From his experience as a hunter, Jin-woo automatically knew what this meant. Perfect. His test was on hold. In other words, if the result was immeasurable on the more sophisticated machine in 3 days' time, he'd unequivocally be an S rank. It's all coming together. If he'd gotten an A rank result today, he would have had to increase his abilities and come back to the association for yet another reevaluation. But a reawakening was already rare enough. So would he tell people he'd had a reawakening? A second awakening was considered lucky, but people would be suspicious about a third. He wanted to avoid wasting any time in getting involved in something annoying. Phew. Jin Woo was relieved the results had come out in his favor. He then turned around. Huh? Everyone in the room was staring at him.